Hi everybody, this is Tanya-Lee Davies. You're listening to KC Radio on 97.7 FM on John Broughton's show Retrospectives.
Well, just to start, how did the show go the other night at the Union?
Oh, the Union was quite beautiful. It was, I had an interesting experience because, having not performed for a while, it feels like starting out all over again.
Yeah, that was my next question. Now that you've got a few gigs under your belt, is it starting to resemble normal again?
What's interesting is it seems to me to be quite random, and by that I mean, when we played at Nemo the other week, I felt very much, in my zone, and I felt, you might have like nervous excitement, which is that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that some other shows, it sort of felt quite foreign, strangely familiar and yet strangely foreign. So it's a really hard thing to explain, I think, to people that the experiences, I've been performing for a long time, so I've been in front of people and on stages for a long time, and yet not doing it virtually. I mean, I think in those 2 years that we were in lockdown, I think I counted, I did maybe, when we had those little breaks, I did maybe 10 gigs over 2 years maximum.
Yeah.
So that's not very many. And it feels, like I said, it's very familiar on one hand, and on the other, sometimes I'm standing up there and I'm thinking, this is what I do, okay.
I guess in one sense it's good that you can at least now book a gig with some degree of certainty that it will go ahead.
Yeah, well, that Union gig that we did was, I think we had 2 cancellations for that one, and we finally got to do it. And the Athenaeum Library, which we did in March, we'd had 2 previous cancellations. And when I did my album launch, which was on the 27th of May, that was the first full band gig I'd done in a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So we'd actually played the single launch, the first single that was released off Dreamland was Kiss Someone, and we'd done that at George Lane again. That was on the 8th of April last year, so 21. And then I'd done a couple of duo shows and trio shows in between that year, but the first full band show was like just over a year later. So that was, that's a long time between,
So finally being able to perform these songs live, and I guess you've been living with these songs for a while and not being able to perform them live, is it like a final chapter in the birth of a song, to the completion of its journey, for want of a better term, to finally be able to do it in front of people?
That's a good question. Because I've released some singles, and so they've gone out into the world, and, you sort of start promoting the album in different ways, like, you're putting your singles out or putting your video clips out. So there were 3 singles that had come out before we actually did the launch. So you feel like it's out there, it's in the ether, and even if we weren't able to perform much, they're out there in some capacity. But for me, I think the actual, that feeling that you're talking about came with the first step is the final mix, and it's like, okay, everything's mixed now, and then that was the moment of, this is done now. And then when you get the mastered copy back, that's the next step. And then the moment it feels very real for me is when I'm holding something in my hand, whether it's the CD, we still don't have vinyl yet, but, holding those CDs, it's like, oh, okay, this is real now. It's actually, that, like you said, I guess that chapter or this particular project, there's a sense of some completion, and then the actual performance of it is a bit like the sharing of that, or the party for it. It's like the party you get to have for all the work that you've done leading up to that.
So far, has the audience response to any songs in particular really stood out to you?
Yeah, I'm just pausing for a moment because I know people seem to really respond to Kiss Someone, which was, like I said, the first single, Love Town, which was the second single, and Bless You, which is the third single, and the film clips of Bless You. They all had film clips, but the film clips of Bless You had quite an impact. But also the first one, because that was made during lockdown, where I asked people to send me footage of themselves, either, with their beloved, kissing, or some people danced, and some people would just, gaze lovingly at one another. And then I had people blowing me kisses, and so that came from all around Australia and a couple from overseas, actually, and edited that together. And that had a real little life of its own, that particular song, because I think, I wrote it. All the other songs on the album were written and pretty much, when I'm trying to think, when we started mixing was in the November, and then by the March we'd gone into lockdown. So I wrote Kiss Someone in April, and while we were in lockdown, and then that whole thing took place, during that time. And there was a certain poignancy to that I think, because it was a song about connection and wanting to connect, and and then having the film clip of people, from all over the place sending me. But they filmed themselves. Some of them were on iPhones. Some of it was fancy and, high res. But it was really quite varied. Yeah. And, people seem to really respond to that one. And, like I said, Love Town, and definitely Bless You, it seems to also have quite a life of its own. Yeah.
So if you could pin a theme on this album, would there be one?
A theme? Wow. I know that there was a theme for me sonically. Like, I definitely had a really clear idea about what sort of sound I was looking for. And I came up with the name Dreamland after it was all finished. So that wasn't in my mind, at the beginning. I had no idea what I was going to call it. But I did use the word while we were mixing and while we were recording, and when I was asking people to play on it, I was looking for very warm sounds, and I used to use the word dreamy a lot, and also almost soundscape was another word that I used quite a lot. And so I had this really clear idea that I wanted it to be very lush and very warm and very soothing. Sounds like a funny word. It's almost, when you say that, so what, you want to put them to sleep or something. But so that was very clear to me. In terms of the themes regarding the songs, I would say no, because I had written a whole bunch of stuff over the time, probably 2 years or so before we went into mixing, because they were done in different studios. There was a few hold-ups there by the time we got to mixing. It had taken a while to get to that point. And so it wasn't like I sat down and I went, okay, I'm going to write a record, I'm going to write songs to compile and make an album with this particular theme or that particular theme, no. But there were songs that I didn't end up putting on there.
Yeah.
That I did. I thought at the end of the day when I was listening to them next to the other songs, I thought, no, that doesn't sort of doesn't fit comfortably enough to me next to what we'd already completed. So, I know that there was a couple that just didn't seem to fit right. So I suppose there was a theme. I'm not sure what that would have been like emotionally or... definitely wasn't an intellectual decision. It was just the songs that I felt were strong, and I also think I made some decisions that were a little different for me. Like I played more of the instruments on this album, and so I had decided that I gave myself permission to be a bit risky. You know, like I played some electric guitar on it, which is definitely not something that I ever sort of envisaged myself doing. I played all the acoustic guitar, which I've done on other albums. I also played some Casio. You can probably hear that on there in a few tracks.
Yeah.
But you can definitely tell the difference between, you know, who was playing which tracks I played the electric guitar on, because it's a little quirkier and the timing's a little wacko, and you know, Shane Riley and Don Mariani played electric guitar, and Shane also played pedal steel, and Ben Franz played some pedal steel on there as well. So you can tell that the tracks that have the very simple, sparse electric guitar sounds with tons of tremolo and reverb on them, that's me. And I got away with it because I had all these other players supporting my what do I call it, primitive, my primitive sound.
I think it's the most perfectly titled album of the year, Dreamland. It just fits it beautifully. That dream-like quality to the sound, that lush sound that you were talking about earlier, it just shines right through all the way through the album.
Oh, that's so good. I love it when I hear that. And somebody else sent me a message the other day that they bought the album and they used the words lush and dreamy, and I always feel really good when I hear that, because it's exactly what I wanted.
Oh, mission accomplished, for sure.
Yeah.
I saw you describe this as a lockdown love child, this album. How different an album do you think it would have been in a non-COVID world?
Well, I think it would have been out a lot earlier, for a start.
Yeah.
We would have finished it a lot earlier. You know, when these things happen, which was, of course, completely unexpected for all of us, all over the world, not just Melbourne. But whenever there's any kind of interruption to a process, you know, creative process, I think there's elements of frustration that come in. Like, you know, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, you know, I just went with the flow and, okay, this is what's happening. You couldn't really go with the flow with the circumstances that we were living inside of. But, yeah, and I did have moments where I was really upset, of course, because we'd have dates booked to go and mix, and then we'd get locked down again, so we couldn't do that. And I just thought, when the hell are we ever going to be able to finish this? And but in hindsight, I think it worked in my favour, because what I really got to do as we went through was just fine tune. And look, some people would say, oh, you can overdo that stuff, and it's true, you can. But in this case, I think that was where I developed that cohesiveness, because I did, like I've said, I had this very specific idea of the sound I wanted to create, and so we just got to keep honing that.
Yeah.
And there was, you know, there's always one or two songs that give you a bit of grief, and so we had the time to revisit that again, and, you know, maybe add or take things out, and rejig stuff, so that at the end I was like, yeah, that's actually the way that's the way I want it.
So,
and I had all that time in between to sit and listen to the rough mixes and figure out what was working for me and what wasn't working, and then when I get to go back in the studio, make those adjustments.
so in a roundabout kind of a way, it was almost a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, strange thing to say, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, I did check out the videos for the singles over the last few weeks, and while I was doing that, I also came across a lot of home videos you were doing live, or not. I'm not sure whether they went over live or not, but I've spoken to a lot of people that have done this over the last couple of years, and it's about 50-50. Some people enjoyed it more than they thought they would. Some people just couldn't cope with it at all. Where did you sit?
What, with creating live during lockdown, or the output?
Live video output during lockdown, yeah.
Oh, yeah, look, that was something I'd never done before. I'd never filmed myself sitting at home playing a guitar and singing and then putting it up on social media. I've often loved watching other people's songs that they've filmed themselves performing, and seen some really beautiful stuff on either Instagram or Facebook or wherever it may be, YouTube. But I'd never done that. I'd always been too self-conscious, and because I don't see myself as a solo artist for a start.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of me sitting, there was one I did many, many years ago. I'm in my kitchen. I don't know if you've seen that one, and that one actually worked. But anyway, when I did the very first one, which was the song "Kiss Someone,"
mm-hmm.
like I said, I'd written that in April. So in the first sort of month, 6 weeks or so that we were in house arrest. And I was in as I'm sure a lot of people were, it was very confounding to me what was happening. And I didn't really know which way it was all going to go. I mean, it was mysterious, it was frightening, it was bewildering, there was so much uncertainty, and there was also a lot of inconsistencies for me. I wasn't understanding. Some of the information didn't match. It was just very confusing, but it seemed serious and it seemed dire. And I'd never faced, I'm a very privileged white girl living in Australia, and I've never really faced any hardship like that before. I've certainly never lived in a country where there's been ongoing war, or I'm really lucky. I've never lived through any of these other horrors that you see, people that have flooding or fire, so that was the first experience that I had of feeling, wow, the world's actually quite out of control. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for the world? And what does that mean to me? And where do I want to put my energy? And where do I want to stop putting energy? And by that I mean I started to get very clear about what mattered to me and what didn't. Mm-hmm. And I was very specific about, well, I can't engage with that right now. I just need to conserve, and I need to decide what I want to do and how I want to be inside this situation. And because I didn't know how it was going to go, and no one did, I thought, well, you know what? Now, if ever, is the time to be brave. And if you want to, it's time to take a risk. And also, I stopped feeling precious about stuff. It's hard. It's interesting as I'm talking about it now, because I'm not really in touch with that feeling as much at the moment. But I thought, how do I contribute something? There was so much fear, so much anxiety, and so much horror. I felt like I was being bombarded. I just stopped watching the TV and the news altogether because I felt barraged, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just play one of these songs. That was like my way of putting something positive out there rather than another horror story. And so that's what I did. I thought, I might just set up the camera and play this song in the lounge room and put it out. And as much as of course you want people to like what you're doing, I didn't do it for that reason. It was something that I did. It was like a bold step for me to break out of my comfort zone and to also back myself in a particular way that maybe I hadn't before, and gone, you know what, it doesn't matter if I'm not the world's best guitar player. That is not what it's about. I'm just sitting here. I'm locked up in my lounge room like everybody else. I'm going to sing a song and play my guitar and film it and put it out there and see what happens. And it was really just an offering, really.
Yeah.
And people were really beautiful. They really responded to it. And so I felt a sense of freedom when I did it. And that then kind of spurred me on to do it again. I can't remember how many times I did it. Maybe I did 6 songs. I can't remember, 5 or something. It wasn't a huge amount. But it was a big deal for me because previously I would only ever have put things up online that was, say, me with my band or a video that had been made. And so to just do that, I didn't even have a microphone. I didn't even know. Eventually I went in one of the breaks we had, I went and bought a decent mic. But I didn't even have that. I was just recording it into my, iPhone. So,
right.
Like the sound was very, very lo-fi. And the first one I did, the framing of it was really quite funny too. I don't think you could even see all of the guitar. There was just like me and my little head bobbing around singing this song, and occasionally you'd see the neck of the guitar. And I wasn't even I didn't even bother getting particularly frocked up for it. But that was great too. It was like, that shit just doesn't know. I just swore on radio, so I can edit that.
No, you're cool.
Let's do that again. That stuff, it doesn't really matter anymore. I felt a real urgency, I think, to be authentic.
Yeah.
And to be revealing, self-revealing, because I felt that everyone was so far apart, and the most important thing that I could think of in those moments was how to connect and how we could connect with one another, given that we physically weren't, aside from, you had your walking partners or whatever.
And that was it.
You couldn't actually connect with other human beings, and that was quite debilitating on many levels. So that was my way of trying to connect.
You also you dabble in a little bit of visual art as well. How important has that been?
I do.
Over the years to have that second creative outlet.
Well, I was one of those musicians that went to art school, so I do have a history of making art, but I started to really embrace that again. I'm trying to think. It has actually been a while now. I was looking at some of the work the other day because I'm packing up my house. I don't know if I told you that. And I realised, I think I went about 10 years ago now. I became more committed to it. And by that I mean, prior to that, I would make pieces of different kinds of. I went through a photography phase, and that was when I started doing collage, because I'd take photographs and then I'd use my photographs as backgrounds and make collages inside the photograph that I'd taken. And I did have an exhibition, I don't know, it was a while ago now. And then I had a second one when I started to do more serious work with collages, and they were all in snow domes, but not domes actually, but they were square, but the same thing, like water in them and glitter, and they shook them, and they and then I just kept going and going, and it's the thing that I did love about it was I had a very different experience of making the art than I did to making the music, and that I wasn't as attached to the outcome when I made the art, and still not. Like, I mean, I love it when people buy stuff, and of course I love people liking the work. It's great. But it's a very different experience for me to writing a song and putting it out. I can't lie and pretend I'm one of those people that's, I'm just going to put it out there. And I want people to like it. I want it to touch people in some particular way. I want people to be affected by it. And so I have way more invested in that. Whereas with the art, it's almost, it's freeing because I just do it and I love doing it and I'm serious about it. I'm very serious about the pieces that I make, and I labour over them, they take quite a long time. And, but I have a freedom with it that's different, I think, to music. I'm just, like I said, I don't know how to explain it other than to say I'm not quite as attached to the feedback, let's put it that way, as I am to the music.
Looking through the players on the album, it was wonderful to see the great Don Mariani make an appearance, which it was great to see. And I'm guessing your connection with Don goes back to early days in WA. Yeah, and Don, when I was in my very first band, we used to play on the same bills. This was before the Stems, probably. Oh, wow.
And then what was his band at that time? I can't think. Maybe it was Ghost Up. Anyway, he asked me to come and do some backing vocals on a track that they were recording, and that was the first time anybody had asked me to sing on something. Like I said, I had my very first band that I was working in Perth with, and my brother was in that band, and some people that I'd been to art school with, and so that was really exciting. That was like one of those moments, you punch the air moments, like, asked me to sing on this album. And, we just stayed friends. I mean, I went back to Perth after I recorded Super Darling and did some gigs there, and Don, I did one really beautiful gig where I had people come and play with me, and Don played a few songs with me. And when he actually played on two songs, and one of them I didn't end up putting on the album. I'm thinking I might use it on the next one. It was it was like that moment. I said I just felt the song. I actually really liked the song. I've had some songs, I don't know how to explain it, but some songs you have different feelings for, different levels of affection for, and I had a strong affection for this particular song, but I realised it didn't fit comfortably next to the others. But he played on Lovetown, and I went over to Perth and we recorded it there, and it was great to see him, and I don't think I've seen him since. I haven't been able to get back there.
Your brother Ash plays on the album as well. He's just released a fantastic record himself. Very convenient having such a talent close at hand in the family. Growing up, which of the two of you was the first to show an inclination towards music?
Well, I started playing guitar when I always wanted to play piano, and my parents had that quite typical response was, oh God, she wants to play the piano. We'll go and buy this piano, and she'll probably play it for 2 weeks, and then never want to look at it again. And so they encouraged me towards the easier option, which was the guitar. And I remember going and having lessons and learning "Hang Down Your Head," Tom Dooley. I think that was the first song I learned how to play. And I did play the guitar. I had this series of lessons, and I learned to play a few songs, but I just kept going on and on and on about the piano. And eventually they got me a piano, and I, luckily for everyone concerned, I was in love with the piano. And so I played the piano for quite a long time and did some grade music and wrote music on the piano. And at some point, I remember Ash, that was really, it's kind of funny living in a house where someone's playing drums, learning drums, because, they're noisy. And, bless my mum and dad, because they had the drum kit set up in in our house, we had what they used to call like the sunroom, which was like the family room where it was all a bit chaotic. And then the other part was when they had friends over and they'd have like a nice lounge room and dining table and stuff for theirs. And Ash's drums were set up in the corner there, and I don't know what the neighbours thought. But I probably started playing a bit before he did, but he was in a band before I was.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wrote on piano the whole way through, and guitar. I went back to guitar later on, and my songwriting style changed quite a bit. And even now, if I write on the keyboard compared to how I write on the guitar, they're quite different. I don't know if other people would pick it, but I always can. Yeah.
Another important contributor to your music on this record and on stage lately too is Amy Curlis, and she's become very in demand as a musician in recent times. How did your connection with Amy come to be?
Somebody asked me that the other day, and I was thinking it was one of those things that's like I don't even remember the exact moment. I know there was a connection via her sister, and I knew Jack, I know Jack Howard, and I'm a huge Bacharach fan.
Oh, yes.
And always have been. And so obviously I'd seen Jack's band, and she plays in Jack's band. And so, and I also knew I really wanted vibes. I've always loved vibes. And I knew that I wanted real vibes. And so when I was making the album, I rang her and she came along and played, and just beautiful, and also played quite a bit of percussion on the album too. And so it was pretty obvious to me that when I started playing, I wanted her to play with me. And she and I have quite a tight relationship. Like we have rehearsed a lot together. We've worked the songs in together a lot, and we do duo gigs. And she's a extraordinary musician, and she's a really beautiful person, and she's been incredibly supportive. It's I think when being let's say a solo artist, I had always loved the band thing. I was in a band my very first band, and I had been in a few bands where, you've got a consistent lineup and you rehearse, and there's something about that. There's something that happens when you're in a band and you play together all the time, and it's also about the music, but it's also about your relationships with one another. And as the writer, to have that support of people interpreting your songs, and also the freedom to say, that's working for me, but I don't know about that. To have that kind of relationship is a really special thing. And I hadn't had that for quite a long time. The last couple of records I'd done were with fantastic people, but it wasn't like I had a band,
Yeah.
And so Amy it's just been so great to have this other person that is on my team and works with me, and I can take stuff to her and say, look, I've got this new song, I reckon we should use it, and she's just always very open, really receptive, and she, like I said, she's an amazing musician, and so I feel really blessed that I found her.
Now, your last album before this featured a wonderful batch of duets with an impressive list of male artists. Would you contemplate down the track doing the same thing again with a list of female performers?
Yeah, well, I started to.
Oh, did you?
I did. I decided that I was going to do an album of duets again, but with women, and I was going to write them. So I did 2 co-writes. one with Gemma Rowlands, who now lives in the States, and one with Coral Lee Farrow, who lives up near Port Macquarie. And I had my hit list, and, you know, I've approached a few of the girls, Alison Ferrier and I hope are going to write something, and I should keep them secret. I'll keep it a surprise. But yeah, that's my next little project.
Oh, fantastic. And just before I let you go, Tanya, down the track, when you look back on this record in a few years' time, do you think you'll look back on it a little different to your other albums, considering the state of the world at the time it was recorded and released?
I think you'd have to, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I think so, because it does feel a bit more of a triumph than normal.
Yeah.
Getting it out was, it did feel a bit like, you know, victory. I used to say to Roger every time we'd get something would get finished, I'd say victory lap, you know, and I'd do this crazy run around the studio. Because I always knew I could release it. You know, whether or not I was ever going to be able to do any gigs, I didn't know what was going to happen there. But I knew I could release it. I knew I could put it out into the world. But as you know, going back to when we first started talking, you know, there is definitely a beautiful element of playing live when you, like you said, when you actually finally get to stand up in front of an audience, even though you haven't done it for a long time, and play the songs and see how. Because they sound different too live. I mean, you know, think about what goes on in the studio and how you end up with those sounds. Because that's not a live album, as you can tell. So things sound different. People respond differently to listening to an album to what they do to a live performance. And there's that whole, you know, performer and audience energetic exchange. And I really like the idea of, you know, having this co-creative thing happening and between the audience. And often I'll ask people I'll have a theme, like, you know, I think everyone should dress in red, and people actually do it. And so there's like this whole arty kind of happening thing going on. And I've forgotten what you asked now. Will I look back on it differently?
Yeah.
I think I will look back on it probably with a feeling of pride that comes from a different place. Yeah, because it was like a bit like climbing a mountain. But more, to be honest with you, emotionally even than artistically or musically. Because for me, I don't know about other people, but to maintain the focus and to not become disheartened and to have faith to keep going in the face of what was going on like I said, in the world, not just in Australia, not just in Melbourne, was a bit of an emotional triumph.
For sure.
I don't know how other people found it. I had a very interesting experience of actually being quite prolific in my output. Like, I wrote a lot, I made a lot of art, and yet the other side was that it was, you know, emotionally and psychically extremely disturbing. And so I kind of look back on it and go, wow, over here I've got this amazing stuff going on that I had this creative was flourishing, and yet on the other side of it was really destabilising. It's quite unusual. The whole experience was very unusual.
So what are the plans for working this record over the next few months?
Well, we've just done some shows, as you know, and we've got something booked at the end of July, the 31st of July at the moment. I'm not trying to do too much. I loved opening for Rob Snarski the other night. Mm-hmm. And I loved opening for Mick Thomas way back, you know, when we first started playing. This is actually before the album came out.
That's right, I remember that gig.
Before we, you know, released the first single. And I would love to do more of that, because I think it's really, really great being able to showcase your material to people that might not see you otherwise, and and also then in terms of just doing my own shows, I think I'm getting the feeling people are still kind of nervy about going out, and so I've decided to be, I don't know if it's wise or not, or too cautious, but just do things every now and again, and also I'm settling back into it. I'm settling back into everything to do with it, whether it's the actual performance, but even just the whole booking of gigs and everything it's like starting over in some ways, and as I said, very familiar, and yet in other ways it's foreign as well. It's like, oh, okay, this is how we do this. I mean, I've got to be honest, putting this album out, I've forgotten how much work it was. I was like, oh my gosh, I've gone from, let's say 0 to hero. I don't know if it was 0 to hero or it was 0 to breakdown, but I'd forgotten. There's a lot. There's a lot to do. And I've had people helping me as well, which I feel really blessed with. But it's a lot coming out of the situation like we were in, and hitting the ground running. That's how it felt to me. Yeah.
Well, you've certainly come up with an album that's, I think, is going to feature on many people's best of lists at the end of the year. You should be, no doubt, you're proud of, and so you should be. It's a fantastic piece of work. Tanya, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute treat speaking with you.
Oh, it's been really great talking to you, and I want to say thank you so much for your kind words, because at the end of the day, the fact that somebody can hear it, those songs, and hear the album, and hear the sounds, and hear all the people that have played on it, and have an experience of, reaching people hopefully with something beautiful is. What do I say? I had a quote I used, like, if I can take people to a dreamy space for 40 minutes, I'm happy. My work is done.
Well, you've certainly achieved that. Hey, good luck with the house hunting. Hope it all goes well.
Yes, thank you.
I don't envy you at all. It's a horrid job, moving house.
All right, John. Okay. Really nice to talk to you.
You too. Take care, Tanya.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.